I think that, at least my first impression was that it was an incredibly pugnacious speech where he came out with both proverbial barrels blazing right at the top.
He put his chest out to those Republicans. He ain't scared of the Republicans.
He certainly met the moment that his members of his party, they wanted him to be a fighter. And boy, fight did he deliver.
He had them every step of the way in a very well-written speech that really flowed in a very smooth way. I've never brought that much energy to the 10 p.m. hour. I'm just telling you. And he lifted that crowd.
Chuckle fest. Joe Concha is a Fox News contributor, and he joins us now. Joe, were they, in fact, watching the same speech that the rest of us were?
Well, to use a Bidenism, Todd, here's the deal. The president was going to be thrown bouquets of flowers regardless of how this address went. Just go back and read the headlines from a year ago, 2023. Same deal. Biden showed passion, vigor, stamina, command of the facts. Look, if Joe Biden did a 70-minute press conference with actual journalists asking the questions, then I think you could apply all those terms around vigor and stamina and passion. But last night was simply a matter of him reading a speech that he practiced for nearly a week off of a teleprompter. He beat expectations because that's easy to do when the expectations are a speed bump. But here's the thing about State of the Union addresses, by the way. They tend to be forgotten pretty quickly. And for all the praise Biden is receiving this morning, I can safely bet that if you went out in the street, Carly's Corner, Todd on the Town, asked anyone who watched that speech if they can remember one major policy announcement or change from Biden's first 3 years. The performance part was there, yes. But what was said, what would make the American people believe that anything will be any different than they were over the first 3 years of this presidency, over the next 5 if he wins re-election? What is his vision for the next 4 years? And if this administration, by the way, can't acknowledge its mistakes, how could they possibly solve the myriad of crises in this country if they pretend they don't exist, Carly?
Yeah, and especially because Robert Hur is going to be testifying publicly in front of Congress on Tuesday next week about the president's mental acuity. So any sort of celebration that Democrats are experiencing right now, depending on what Robert Hur says, could potentially be short-lived. Joe, here are a few other moments from the president last night. Watch this.
But Israel has Israel has a added burden. Legacy that inspired me to pursue a career in service. Am I going? Which way? Right here. Right here. Which way am I going?
And then right this way.
He had a little trouble finding his way out of the chamber. So a mix of good and bad when it comes to performance. But on the substance, Joe, of what he was saying last night, before the speech, I was thinking about, and this is like way above my pay grade, but if I was going to help write the speech, what I would do is cater to and really tailor make this speech to the Nikki Haley supporter, a person, the voter out there that now that she's dropped out of the race and may not like former President Trump, doesn't really know who to vote for. And in order for that to happen, I feel like the president couldn't blame Republicans for the economy and couldn't blame Republicans for illegal immigration. And he did both those things. So now you're kind of left wondering if he left some voters hanging that he could have taken to vote for him.
Carly, this felt like a speech that was catered to the MSNBC crowd, CNN crowd, the type of people that will read the New York Times op-ed and Washington Post op-ed pages on a daily basis. They loved it, yes, but did it really appeal to the independents out there? You made a great point earlier with Cheryl as far as when you talk about how great the economy is and how many jobs you've so-called created when they were basically restored after COVID. Do you really show a Bill Clinton moment where he famously said, I feel your pain. Mm-hmm. It was as if everything is great in terms of the economy. The border is Republicans' fault. Crime really doesn't exist. Education's doing great. I think the American people feel something much different. That's why I don't think this speech moves the needle one bit. It does with his base. They loved it. Yeah. But the independence that he needs, I'm not sure it reached them.
Side note here. First, you steal my Todd on the Town gig. Now you steal my Nikki Haley voter question gig. I'm going to make sure that everything is still in my office when I get back there because I don't trust sticky fingers over here. Meantime, Nancy Pelosi taking issue with the president's comment on Laken Riley, but not for the reason you may think. Watch this.
You should have said undocumented, but that's not a big thing, okay?
What's the big thing about it?
No, I actually wasn't even going to ask about that. I was just going to ask more about the moment. But you do think that he should have said undocumented? That wasn't going to be my question.
Well, we usually say undocumented. He said illegal. I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay.
I don't think it's a big deal.
But more broadly.
Because I think his focus was on the sympathy for the family.
Yeah.
It's a terrible tragedy.
Okay, to be clear, Nancy Pelosi is calling out the fact that he said illegal migrant, not the fact that Joe Biden, in front of the nation, called the slain nursing student the name of the currently alive USC football coach, which was ridiculous. So, what does it say about the state of the Democrat Party that the one thing Joe Biden got right in this speech is criticized by the former Democrat Speaker of the House?
Can you imagine that? I mean, instead of Nancy Pelosi sending condolences to the family, she's worried about insulting her base by Biden using the correct term. And why did the president have to be shamed into saying her name and offering his condolences to the family, by the way? He should have done that when this happened the day after. It shouldn't be, oh, by the way, my condolences. So always judge any leader on their actions, guys. And the president had a chance here to announce a series of executive actions regarding reversing Trump's border policies, including resuming wall construction, remain in Mexico policy, highly effective. He didn't do it. Deeds, not words, matter. Always judge Joe Biden, particularly on his deeds, because he had a lot of words to say last night, but not much to back him up.
Well, we got a State of the Union address and Super Tuesday elections all wrapped up in 1 week. Let's have ourselves a weekend. Have a great day, Joe.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.